Welcome to everyone here in person and to everyone who is visiting our service from home, thanks to modern technology. The Youth Fellowship of Lake Norman is an open and inclusive congregation. Our members walk diverse paths to find meaning and purpose, but we are united by our belief in the inherent worth and dignity of all, by the responsibility to express our faith through acts of justice and compassion. My name is Molly Stith, and I've been a member of this congregation since 2013. Our speaker today is David Novak. He is an artist who tells stories, teaches, and shares his art with UU congregations and internationally. His themes today are truth, trees, winter, the death of the old, and the birth of the new. These themes will be drawn from the Norse story of death Balder via the mistletoe. Mr. Novak?
Oh, am I speaking now?
Just an opening word.
An opening word? Okay. Let's see. All right. Good afternoon. All right. Well, here's an opening word. The word is true. The interesting thing about the word true is the etymology of the word, that it is from a common root shared with the word for tree. Proto-Indo-European origins of our language can be fascinating and reveal interesting stories. Why would trees and truth be associated with each other? It's very interesting. But a tree is pretty solid. And you may choose not to believe in trees, but if you run into one, the tree wins. So I can see why, knock on wood, tree and truth are associated with each other. Of course, we use the word true in a variety of ways. And when we speak of it, something that is true, we're also talking about something that is straight and sturdy, right? For example, if you're an archer and you're aiming your arrow to the target and your aim is true, you loose the arrow and it arrives where it was intended to arrive. So the idea of trees associated with truth in the original sense of true. It's interesting to note too that the same root word is the word we find in the word druid, the Proto-Indo-European root being dre or dru, something like that, combining with a word meaning in its sense basically vision. So the Druids were those who could literally see the trees or know the truth.
Please join me in reciting the chalice lighting words as printed in your order of service. We light this one chalice to illuminate the world we seek.
In our search for truth, may we be just. In our search for justice, may we be loving. And in loving, may we find peace.
Remain comfortably seated as, story for all ages. So it's an invisible ink, but there's a story for all ages, and Mr. Novak will lead that for us. Any of those young or young at heart would like to come up to join the story for all ages? Ellery. I'll be a big kid with you.
This being a Unitarian Universalist congregation, I'm sure you can appreciate a certain amount of informality and license.
Yeah.
We're flexible.
Since you've gathered on that's my experience of the story for all ages. So Quinn, you're going to have to just follow as best you can, bud, because sitting on the floor is often where the story happens. Yeah. Okay. So I want to tell you a story about a tree. A willow tree. It was indeed a weeping willow. It was a sad weeping willow tree, constantly weeping, which is why it was growing near water, as they do. The poor willow tree felt itself, well, not up to standards for trees. It couldn't stand straight. It tried. Oh. And to make matters worse, beside that weeping willow stood a tall, handsome, strong oak. He looked down upon that little weeping willow. You call yourself a tree? You can't even stand straight and tall like me. You're not a tree, you're just an ambitious bush. Here I stand strong. I'm the stuff that great houses are made of, that boats are built of. I hold nests for birds and squirrels, and I can be a perch for the great eagle. I am tall and strong. I am weak and frail. It just so happened a great storm came. The wind blew and swirled and twirled into great tornadoes, and as the wind blew, the poor willow was shaken. Whoa, this way, and whoa, that way, whoa, this way. And the oak said, I'm not going to bend for any wind like this. You can't make me. But as the wind got stronger, strength was greater than that of the oak. The oak tree fell flat on its face. And when the storm had passed, the willow was still standing. Oh dear, the oak has fallen. I guess maybe I was lucky that I could go with the flow and not try to fight the blow. And you know, the willow became happy at that. Mm-hmm. And the poor oak suddenly knew sadness. Oh dear, he said, I've fallen and I can't get up. What's to become of me? Well, now, said the willow, I used to be sad like you are now, but I discovered that, well, the way I am is the way I was meant to be, and I can be okay with that. Yeah, well, I can't stand any longer. No, now you're a log. What good is a log? No eagle will perch on me. No, that's true. But just then along came a bear. It was wintertime, and the bear was looking for a nice place to hold up and den for the winter, and found this fallen oak log and asked, may I come and make my home with you? There, you see, said the willow, you have a new role in life. And so it was. The bear came and made his home with the oak for the winter, and the tree discovered that his new phase of life might have rewards after all.
Thank you.
Now I have oaks and willows for all my story listeners. Anyone who wants one. And I'll share with you. I've been sharing that story this week with my friends in the pre-K programs in Asheville.
Oh, good.
And so I have extras. Would you like your own willow? All right. And your own oak?
Thank you.
Bear that in mind when the winds are blowing and change is coming.
Join us in singing the children out.
Okay. Thank you, Teresa. That was wonderful. Sweet. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed that Aesop's fable of the willow and the oak. I'm thinking about a scene in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Now, some of you may have seen the movie. There's a scene in the movie where Harry is standing alone just before winter break in what's called the Room of Requirement. And he's with the young woman, Cho, who he's kind of enamored of, and they're both sort of into each other. And they're looking each other fixedly in the eyes after talking a bit. And then they move in for the kiss. And a mistletoe grows from the ceiling over them and blossoms with bright golden berries. Remember that scene. So Balder was one of the high gods of Asgard in the Norse legends, in the early Norse myths. Are you familiar? Probably somewhat familiar with some of those characters. They're very popular. Balder's never mentioned, though, in today's Marvel universe. Thor has perhaps taken the lead role, and Thor is a very important and interesting and intriguing story, but not today's story. Balder's story is what I want to share with you. In the Norse pantheon, the gods lived in Asgard, which was one of the 9 realms that were held aloft by the great ash tree Yggdrasil, the tree of the world. There was Asgard, there was Vanaheim, there was Alfheim, Svartalfheim, Jotunheim, the land of the giants. There was Muspelheim, Niflheim, and Helheim, the realm of the dead, guarded over by Hel, the goddess of the dead. More of her later. Up in Asgard, all the gods gathered, and they had their halls of feasting and carousing, and they had their great places of gathering. And of all the gathering halls, Baldur's was the most popular. Breidablik, the bright and shining hall. And in that hall there grew a great oak tree. It was a hall of truth and justice. No deceit could enter into that hall. And any judgment that was passed there was fixed and unyielding. It was the home of the unassailable truth. And Balder was the personification of truth and light himself. Balder was the son of Wotan, Odin, who we propitiate every Wednesday, whether we know it or not, and Frigga, the king and queen, if you will, the mother and father gods of the gods of Asgard. Balder had a brother, Hod. Balder and Hod were as different as day and night. Hod was the soul of darkness. Not a malicious or a malign kind of darkness. He was blind, inner seeing. He was the cooling dark in summer shade. He was the alluring dark at the mouth of the cave. He was the friendly dark that followed in our shadows. Hod was in the dark, and Balder, by contrast, was all light. Not simply the source of light, but the fleeting life of light, the glittering light on the surface of the sea, or the sparkling ice in the icicles, sparkling light in the icicles hanging down, the flare of light when a match struck. And he was beloved of all the gods. Now, it happened that one night, as Balder was sleeping, he had a dream. He was disturbed by a dream, and he awoke with the disturbing news of his dream. Now, oftentimes, if we're bothered by our dreams, one of the first things we do is say, well, it was just a dream, as if it had no veracity, no truth to it. But remember, Balder's hall was the home of truth, and no deceit could enter. So any dream that would come to Balder, therefore, had to be true. And the dream he had was that hell was preparing a great feast in the feasting hall of the dead, putting out the benches, strewing the floor with straw, glittering the walls with gold and jewels, brewing mead to receive Balder. They were preparing for his death, and Balder reported this dream and knew that it must be true, that he was destined now to die. Well, now their mother and father, Odin and Frigg, didn't like to hear that their son was going to die. And so Odin, wanting to find out the truth of this dream, leapt upon his 8-legged horse, Sleipnir, and then rode down through all the 9 realms to the hall of Hel herself. And there she was, the queen of the dead, on her throne. Half of her body was putrefaction, decaying flesh, and raw bone. And the other half of her body was alluring beauty. That is death, isn't it? And Odin came to her and said, "What's going on? I see the halls are being made ready for a feast. The brew of mead is steaming in the air. Why?" And she said, "We are getting ready for Balder. He is coming to us soon." Odin wasn't satisfied with that answer, and so he went into Niflheim, where the dead dwell about the halls of Hel. And he, using the power of runes, which he had acquired by trading his eye, which is another story, but he used his runes to conjure up the spirit of a dead seer, a prophetess that he brought up from the earth, and he begged of her and he tricked from her the truth of this. And she said, "Oh yes, Balder is to die. There is no way to avoid that. And that will herald the beginning of Ragnarok, the end of days, when all the gods will battle all their enemies and everyone will die." This and other things she foresaw, she shared with Odin. And Odin took this sad and heavy news back up to Asgard, where his wife Frigg was not happy to hear it. No mother wants harm to come to her son. And Frigg, being the great goddess that she was, determined that this would not be Balder's fate, that she would protect him from any harm. Now think about it. What harm could come to you here now? Can you think of something that might possibly go wrong here in this room today that could bring you harm? Do you know that sort of catastrophic imagination that we carry with us, that apprehension that goes into a new place and immediately looks for the exits and the dangers? That is really the source of all creativity, isn't it? Apprehension. Well, Frigg dug deep down into that sense of danger that all mothers carry with their children. She put on her falcon-feathered cloak and flew through all the realms and went to every possible source of danger. She went to each of the elements, to fire, and she commanded of fire that it promise not to bring burn or pain or death, not to cause choking or smoke that would in any way harm her son. And fire promised. She came to water. No drowning. No harm to my son. No rot. And water promised. Metals, stones, and all of the animals. To all of them she went. Tirelessly, ceaselessly, she went to all the 9 realms, to every possible danger that might pose a threat to her son Balder, and she extracted from them all a promise of goodwill and safety. And they all agreed. Meanwhile, back up in Asgard, Balder's brother Thor, I mentioned him before, famous for being hot-headed, for thundering about in the heavens over us, was insulted by some prank and took his hammer and slammed it down hard upon a boulder. And the boulder shattered into 1,000 flying shards. And as he hit that boulder, the shards flew directly towards Balder, where he was standing. And suddenly, Thor and all who were watching thought, this is it. This was Balder's destiny. This is when he would die. But to their amazement, as the stone shards flew towards Balder, they crumpled into dust and fell at his feet. They did not even touch him, for, you see, they had been part of that promise made to Frigg. And when Mother Frigg came back from her journey, from her sojourn through the 9 realms, she saw what they were all standing around amazed at. Balder surrounded by the shards and the dust of the great boulder that had avoided giving him any harm. Tyr, the great warrior who had given his hand up to the mouth of the wolf Fenris, that's another story, came up to Balder with his sword and just gently pointed the sword at Balder's chest, but the sword moved aside. He tried again, a little harder. But no matter how hard he tried to attack Balder with his sword, the sword refused to hit the mark. For it too, you see, had promised to Frigg, no harm shall come to Balder. Now, when the others began to see this, they saw, well, this looks like fun. And so they began, picking up stones and tossing them and watching them disintegrate before him. They tried lighting fires, which would flow and blow away, not even singeing Balder's feet. They would shoot arrows. They'd throw boulders. Even Mjolnir was brought into the game and thrown directly at Balder. Thor's great hammer simply came back to Thor's hand. Balder said to his mother, now what's going on? She said, exactly what I intended. I have made the world safe for you. I remember my mother saying something to me like that once. I wish I could make the world safe for you. But Frigg actually pulled it off. Balder said, Mother, if I am to die, I am to die. If it is to be today, it will not be tomorrow. If it is not today, then it will be tomorrow. The readiness is all. She said, but surely it is better to be alive than dead. And the living man gets the cow. But Balder was content to live the destiny that was carved for him. He said, there are no greater carvers than the Norns who carve our fates for us. No greater destinies than their carvings. I will accept what has been made for me. Why don't you do the same? But she refused. Now, there was up there in Asgard, well, there were 2 people who could not enter into Balder's bright hall, into Breidablik. One was Hod, because even though he was Balder's brother, he was darkness, and the hall itself was all light. And he would go where the light was not. But the other who was not permitted was not permitted into that hall, could never enter it, because he abhorred the truth. He was a deceiver, a disguiser, a disturber. And maybe you've heard of him. Loki. Loki it was who saw an opportunity here to create some disturbances. As Balder stood out in the open field and all the other gods jested at throwing weapons of destruction at him, at watching his unassailable stance and his invulnerability there, Loki wanted to know why and how and what. And he knew that Frigg had done something, but did not know what she had done. Now, he knew that if he went straight to her, she would have nothing to do with him. But he was a deceiver and a disguiser. And so he bent his bones and he wrinkled his flesh and he let his hair grow long and greasy, and he put on long pendulous breasts and covered himself in a ragged cloak and became the figure of an old crone. And in this way came hobbling towards Frigg's hall, where she sat in the outer steps, watching the fun of all the boys throwing things at Balder. Oh, old woman that he was now, he came to the steps of Frigg and asked, kind mother, may I just rest my old bones here for a moment? And Frigg, being all generosity, said, yes, by all means, old mother, here, come, sit beside me and watch the fun the boys are having. You call that fun? Those boys are flirting with death and danger. I do not see how that is fun. I always told my boys to beware and to watch out, and did they listen to me? No. And what happened? Well, I was proved right. Oh, it is the great sorrow of my life. It is the greatest tragedy of all, to outlive one's children. Oh, so old mother, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for your loss, but I do not fear, as you say, for my son Balder will come to no harm in these games. I have made sure of that. Oh, how can you be so sure? Well, I've gone everywhere and I've extracted a promise from all things, all elements, all animals, all items that might in any way bring harm to my son, and they have promised to do no harm, and that is what you are seeing happening here. Oh, well, I've never heard of such. Well, that's amazing. You mean, just tell me that the stones have promised not to harm him? Yes. And the fire? Oh, yes, indeed. Oh, wow. You mean there's nothing? Nothing that you've overlooked that might bring harm to Balder standing there? Oh, no, I've made a very thorough effort at this. It took me a while, but I did get it done. Oh, aren't you good? Good for you. Good for you, I say. Good for you. That's pretty good. That's very good. You'll never have to know the pain I carry with me day and night. The ants. Did you ask them? I mean, the ants, look at them. They may seem insignificant, right? One ant. What's one ant? But when an entire colony of ants decides that they don't like you, that can be trouble. Oh, yes, I know it can, yes. No. The ants have promised. Good for you. Good for you. Leaves. The leaves of the oak tree, when they fall, they're dry and they brittle. But, if you get one caught up your nose, that's trouble. Yes, I've thought of the leaves. They won't give him any harm. Well, that's very good. That's good for you. Good for you. A feather. Even a feather can bring harm. Did you think of that? Oh, yes, I did. Yeah, no, the birds have all promised that not even their feathers will bring harm to Balder. Good for you. Good for you. There's nothing, is there? Nothing at all that you've overlooked, huh? Well, I mean, nothing that could bring him harm. There was just a little sprout of a mistletoe in a cleft of the great oak, and it was just a child, and totally harmless, so I passed it by. I did not make it promise. Well, of course not. No, why would you have a mistletoe? It's just a soft, frail little thing. How could that possibly bring harm to anyone, let alone a great god like your son there? Well, you may enjoy these games, but watching it like this, it just brings me too much pain. So pardon me, but I must leave. Yes, well, good luck to you, old mother. Sad old crone. I'm so glad I will not have to face her fate. Now Loki knew. It was the mistletoe. The mistletoe, alone of all elements, had not given a promise to keep Balder safe. And so Loki removed his disguise and went to the mistletoe, now growing into a larger bush there in the cleft of the great oak, and spoke to the mistletoe. Do you know that Frigg went around and got a promise from all of the animals and all of the elements and all beings that they will not harm Balder, but she ignored you completely? I mean, she's insulted you. She left you out of all the games. Are you going to stand for that? I think it's unfair. I think you should teach her a lesson. I think you should make her notice you. I don't think you should be treated this way. Mistletoe heard this, and Loki convinced it. Yes, and so the mistletoe gave Loki a long branch from its bush, and Loki took that branch and sharpened it until it was needle sharp. And then he came to Balder's brother, Hod, who was sitting aside in the shade, and said, Hod, why do you not play in the games? Do you not know that everyone is honoring Balder by throwing these weapons at him and pretending to bring him harm? Loki, said Hod, you are a fool. My eyes are turned inward. I cannot see what's going on, what they are doing. Why should I be a part of their fun? Well, because it's your brother. Have you no brotherly love for Balder? I think you really ought to at least make a gesture, even if you fail at it. That everyone will understand. They'll at least know that you too share in the joy and the honor we're giving to Balder today. Well, what can I do? Honestly, I cannot even find my way to him except by sound and feeling. Well, I was thinking about that too, and I found something here. I have just a little dart. It's a tiny thing. Here, you want to feel it? Yes. Oh, it's quite sharp. Yes, but even Tyr's sword cannot penetrate Balder's safe zone. So there's no harm in throwing a little dart at him. Here, I have a bow, nice, tightly strung bow. That we can put it on the bow, and you can let it loose towards Balder, and then you can be a part of all the fun. And so he talked Hod into playing along, putting his hand on Hod's, and then making sure that his aim was true, loosed that mistletoe spear right towards Balder's heart. And in the midst of the explosions and the clamor and the shouting and the thunder, the mistletoe went straight into his heart. And his heart stopped. Then Balder said, "Today I die." And so he fell. And all were amazed. And what happened after is many stories. To Hod, to Loki, but to Frigg, still she would not let go of her urgent need to save her child, and so she flew again through all the realms. She found from hell that Balder might come back to the living if everything agreed that they loved him and wanted him to come back to life. And so, again, she made the exhaustive flight through all the realms, and everyone agreed that they wanted Balder to come back, except one petulant, angry giantess lurking in a cave refused, and so Balder could not be reclaimed. It was, of course, Loki in disguise. And so the funeral was made, and he was put upon his great ship, Ringhorn, with his mate, Nanna. They were pushed out to sea aflame. And all beings from all the realms, friends or enemies, had gathered for the funeral of Balder, and they all watched the flames drift into the open ocean and die. And Odin knew that was the beginning of the end of days, and Ragnarok was to follow. Balder died, and with him, truth had fallen. So Ragnarok comes, and everyone destroys everyone, and everything is basically laid to waste. But Odin, before he fell, knew the rest of the prophecy that he had heard from the seers, that after this axe age, this wolf age, this age of broken compacts and broken promises, after all of this had fallen, would come a new age, a green age. And it would begin with one man and one woman standing up upon the ruins of the past. Remember that image from the movie of Harry Potter where the boy and the girl are looking at each other and leaning in for the kiss, and the mistletoe comes magically down and blooming above them? The mistletoe was said to have taken from Balder his light, and that light still shines in the bright berries of the mistletoe. And it will now give that light of truth back. But, we tend to think, if you stand under the mistletoe, this is a common, winter Yule tradition. You stand under the mistletoe with someone, you kiss them, you love them. But it may be the other way around. If you have that love, perhaps the mistletoe is called forth. The light that was lost of Balder is brought back. So here's how I see it. I've got my neighbor, Kevin, works for the Forestry Service. So I was asking him about mistletoe. And he said, well, if you see even a small shoot of mistletoe in an oak tree, that's it. There's nothing you can do to save the tree. It's too late even then. Because the root of the mistletoe has already insidiously made its way deep into the tree. And there's no saving it after that. It's only a matter of time. The mistletoe kills its host, and in ancient tradition was believed to have taken from the host its life source, which we see in the golden berries. And I'm thinking about how we have seen the sprout of the mistletoe. We have seen the bald-faced, open, egregious attacks on the truth in our present day, right before our eyes. Disinformation, misinformation, the post-truth era, right? Fake news and all of that, playing out right before our eyes, but it was already too late. That was just the sprout of the mistletoe revealing itself. For its roots had been there deep, and we didn't discover that until sometime after, when we realized we hadn't been living the truth for a long time. And we had to make a reckoning with the falsehoods that had organized our lives. I mean, for myself, things like the racial disintegrity of our society, right? Events like the massacre at Tulsa or Wilmington had been unknown to me. Isn't it interesting how these things came to light at the same time that truth was being assaulted? And oftentimes I've thought, I used to think, well, this is terrible. Somebody needs to tell the truth. We do the fact checking, the Pinocchio score and everything. Our politicians are going on with their telling us lies, what lies they're telling us and everything, and thinking this is terrible. We've got to put an end to this. We've got to put these people in jail. But at the same time, they're a part of that greater mistletoe when the truth was already sick and ailing, when it needed to be brought down, when that great, firm, unassailable oak had to break and fall and make a winter home for the bears. That the death of Balder is about the death of truth, is how I see it. Now, I'm sharing with you a story, and I'm sharing what I make of it, because the old stories that we have are just fragmentary. And so there's lots of what we call lacuna, right? That you have to fill in the gaps. And that's where it gets fun for a storyteller, to try to figure out what's in the gaps. And that's what I'm finding in the gap. What I'm finding in the gap is that it's time to let the truth go. Because the Ragnarok is the fighting of all sides against each other over the death of truth in a way. But that the light of truth will come back, possibly, if we can share a loving gaze with one another and call forth the gold of the mistletoe. And I think that's why in this UU congregation we say, we light this flaming chalice to illuminate the world we seek. In our search for truth, may we be just. In our search for justice, may we be loving. And in loving, may we find peace. I think when I listen to that story, I think it's telling me the truth won't come back necessarily by warring, but by loving. What do you think?
Amen. Beautiful job. Mm-hmm. Beautiful job, David. Thank you so much.
I'll second the amen. So we would like to open up a talk back opportunity with David Novak, our guest speaker. No formality of it after hearing his message and interpreting it as he has as well. Does anybody want to offer a conversation or have a question? Do you have a question, David?
Well, I loved how you tied the children's sermon into the regular sermon.
Oh.
Nice touch. I do want to ask a question too. If you kill the mistletoe, if you cut the mistletoe out of the tree when the tree left, it's too late. Secondly, it's too late.
That's what I'm told by my forester.
It's amazing.
But there may be those of you with expertise in forestry or in trees and can shed some more light on that. Yeah. The mistletoe is the tradition of the mistletoe it's a difficult one to pin down. There's a lot of sort of explanations out there and nothing that's really certain about it, which I find intriguing. Again, and it's mysteries like that, and it's partial stories like the story of Balder that for me create what we might call a story vacuum. It just sort of sucks in possibilities and imaginings and what could have happened here, what could this mean? And I couldn't help but latch on to some things that I found very concretely and tangibly recognizable, which is the urgency of the mother to make the world safe for her child, and also the discovery of certain Norse proverbs that clearly Shakespeare made use of in his story of the Prince of Denmark, right, of Hamlet, because if I'm to die today, it's not tomorrow. It will not be tomorrow. If it be not tomorrow, yet I will die. The readiness is all. I mean, that's Hamlet, right? So, and that's right out of the Norse Eddas. So, interesting that certain pieces like that are part of the puzzling of a story.
When you talk about trees and truth, thoughts came to me about truth and trees being grounded, having roots.
Yeah. That a tree has a kind of fixity to it, and it holds fast to the earth, and it's earthbound. Yeah. I mean, I have felt in some ways that, and this is another story cycle, but I'll just hint at it, but that there are a number of versions of stories around the world of the separation of heaven and earth. And it's interesting to me that there would be so many cultures, diverse and divergent, that would still tell stories that once upon a time heaven and earth were in unison, and they came to be separated by various means. And there's a number of interesting stories about how that happened. But it does sometimes feel as though there was a separation, and that we're living in that time in between, you know, and that there's the earthbound, like the tree, you know, and there's the heavenward attention, and oftentimes it's Father Sky and Mother Earth, and it's like a rancorous cosmological divorce, and we're the children caught in the middle.
What was that word, what?
Cosmological. That is, in terms of cosmos, simply it means order, right? You know, yeah. I mean, cosmology today is often sort of relegated to the astrophysicist, but in fact, it has to do with just the story of our order, of how things are and how they came to be. And so that's maybe another set of stories for another time. But the rootedness of the tree, I think, is very important part of the idea of truth. Yeah. And then, of course, a tree that has its true grain, maybe, you know, its straightness to it. I think that's maybe why the ash tree is the tree of choice for Yggdrasil, because ash was often the tree used for the wood that was used for spears, for example, because it had such straight and true grain to it. So interesting.
And then I keep thinking of the family tree.
Yeah.
And the mother and how she's trying to save her son. But also, if you don't have truth in a family, you often family can disintegrate.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
I think probably a lot of us in this room are struck with the fact, David, that you had no idea we have a couple in our congregation. They're not here today, but they're very much on our minds and hearts, who just lost their daughter. And you're talking about all the efforts that the mother made to avoid losing her son. It's very, very striking to have you here today talking about that with not having any idea that that's very much our story right now. And that funeral is next Saturday. Kind of makes the hair stand up on the back of my head.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm sorry and moved to hear about that. And I'm grateful that I could be part of that story in my own indirect kind of way.
Very
synchronous way. Yeah.
Very synchronous.
Yeah. But of course, it's a reminder. I mean, this is an old story, right? I mean, we're talking thousands and thousands of years old. And the only record we have of the story comes from the Christian monks who were trying to transliterate it. And of course, so therefore, we know it's going to be askew, right? You know, put through a filter. But certain things are universal, aren't they?
They are.
Into the human experience. Yeah. I think in a sense, the story of Balder and of Ragnarok is kind of a Norse book of revelations, if you will. It's kind of a similar sort of feeling of a sense of the end days. And winter is perennially the end time. I mean, this is how we always see it, you know. So if you light a Yule log on the solstice, think of the ship of Balder and a Viking funeral out there floating a flame at sea. And then go kiss somebody.
Thank you.
In sweet fields of autumn, gold rain is falling, the white clouds drift going, the wild swan is calling. Alas for the daisies that offer grasses, when swept and rainfall fill the gardens and pastures. The snows of December shall fill the hall of flickering trails after watchmen shall fall. The deer through the valleys leave winter their going, and diamonds of sleet mark the ridges of the stillness of death shall stir o'er the water, the plovers sweep low where the pale streamlets float. But deep in the earth the rock seed is living, when spring suns are bubbles o'er mossy
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you, David. This fellowship is important to us all, and the contributions that we make today allow us to sustain and grow our congregation and to reach out to our community, both nearby and in the larger world. Your giving affirms our commitment to each other and to the community. grateful hearts we receive these gifts. May they encourage us to live lives of integrity, compassion, and peace. If you would, please turn to your order of service. I have a few announcements. First, please note that next Sunday is our annual meeting. We encourage you to attend in service because we will be having our votes and discuss the financial report. Heart of Carolina's UU Ministry will also have another fence build next Saturday. And as you know, Kevin Cook will host Jim and Gail's family to remember Stephanie, and that's at 4:00.
4:00.
They'll receive friends after, is my
Yes.
understanding. Okay.
Will there be a written notice, or email notice with the address?
Regina, where is Regina? Has it been in the newsletter, Regina?
Yes.
Okay, it's been in the newsletter, Harvey. It'll be in the newsletter again on Thursday.
Well, I'm out at Arda.
I'm sorry?
I'm out at, I didn't even miss that.
Me too, buddy. Me too.
Next Saturday is our last fence build for dogs Cookie and Abby. If you have any questions, you can see Claudia or Jim about that. Let's see. Reverend Pat will lead a memorial service. You'll be leading this memorial service. Okay, thank you. Our closing song today is 1058, Be Ours a Religion. In your till hymnals, please stand as you are willing and able.
This may be unfamiliar, so we'll do it the way we did the other one. I'll do a phrase and you sing it back to me, please. Be ours a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere. Be ours a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere. Its temple holds peace, its shrine a good heart. Its temple holds strength, its shrine a good heart. Its sweet old truth, its ritual works of love. Its creed old truth, its ritual works of love.
Thank you. I like those words. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again. Go in peace. Thank you.